the fact that if you do not build coherence around yourself, you're not going to get anywhere, because either we fly together or we do not fly at all. Science is culture before being, technicality, but mentorship is the human relationship. Follow your own instinct. Uh, if one day you will ask yourself, or somebody will ask, why the hell did you do what you did? And you would have an answer, say, I liked it, I loved it. This was something that I had a strong feeling for, and there's only one life, and I did what I wanted to do.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Decoding Phase Translations, the DPT Podcast. I'm your host Sananda Biswas, and here we decode career phases of brilliant minds in academia and beyond. Today's episode is a very special one. This is the 20th episode of the DPT Podcast, and for me, it feels like a small milestone in the journey of this channel. But what makes this small milestone feel truly big is today's guest, Professor Erio Tosatti. Professor Tosatti is one of the most distinguished theoretical condensed matter physicists of our time. He completed his degree in physics at the University of Modena, Italy, and his doctorate at Scuola Normale Superiore in Pisa, where he worked under the supervision of Franco Bassani in theoretical condensed matter physics. He later spent time at the University of Cambridge collaborating with P.W. Anderson, and then held research positions with the Italian Research Council CNR in Rome and in Trieste. He went on to become a full professor at SISSA and played a fundamental role in building the condensed matter theory communities at both SISSA and at the Abdus Salam International Center for Theoretical Physics ICTP in Trieste. His scientific contributions span a remarkably wide landscape of condensed matter physics, from surfaces, nanostructures, metal nanoware, strongly correlated systems, polarites, high-pressure physics, friction and nanofriction, to the broader theoretical understanding of complex materials. His work has been recognized through many major honors, including the Tit Medal for International Leadership in Physics, the Enrico Fermi Prize, Fellowship of the American Physical Society, membership in the Accademia Nazionale dei Lincei, election as a foreign associate of the US National Academy of Sciences, and foreign member of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. But this conversation is not only about awards and scientific achievements. It is also about a life philosophy. In this episode, Professor Tosatti takes us back to his childhood. The first 11 years of his life was spent in a peasant family in rural Italy. He speaks about hard work, duty, community, coherence, and the necessity of doing things together. We talk about his schooling in Modena, where a technical school shaped his way of thinking. Mathematics taught him that logic is like a knife, which can separate reality from error. And Italian and history taught him that we do not come out of a vacuum. We grow by standing on the shoulders of those who came before us. We then followed his journey into physics, doing a job while studying at university, going to CERN as a summer student, then moving from high energy physics to theoretical condensed matter physics, and eventually finding his way to Pisa, Cambridge, Rome, and Trieste. But what comes out most strongly in this episode is not only the story of a great scientist, it is the story of someone who believes deeply in people, in human spirit, in creating opportunities for others, and in building things together. Again and again, Professor Tosatti returns to the importance of inclusion, duty, mentorship, and community. He speaks about science not merely as a technical achievement, but as a culture. He reminded us that mentorship is first a human relationship. So in this episode, we discuss childhood, science, institutions, failures, great scientists, human relationships in research, and what it means to lead a life by curiosity, duty, and collective purpose. For me, this conversation felt like receiving wisdom from someone who has spent lifetime thinking, building, mentoring, and creating space for others. So with great honor and gratitude, here is my conversation with Professor Erio Tosatti on the DPT Podcast. Welcome, Erio, to our podcast, Decoding Phase Translations. We are so happy to have you here today. We are honored and truly blessed. So we are looking forward to an amazing conversation.
Morning, Sananda. It's nice to see you again. After you left here, you left a hole behind. Right.
Oh, thank you. It's such a kind words. I had amazing time in Trieste and working with you guys and having that warm environment to do science actually opened up lots of opportunities for me. And with opportunities also, it came with a personal insight kind of. That was a personal story. But today we are not talking about me, it's about you. And we want to know your journey, your learnings. Looking at you from your career, I can see there are three main pillars that I want to focus on today. One is obviously your scientific excellence. That is the biggest pillar in this. Also, along with that came the mentorship and also institution building that you were a great part of. I would like to go through then first is the scientific excellence, but that starts with maybe at the very beginning, your childhood and what kind of childhood did you have? What kind of atmosphere was there back then? And were you always curious about science or physics, or this came much later in your life?
Thanks for the introduction. I came from a very different reality in the start. I was born and grew up the first 11 years of my life in a peasant family, a reality that was closer to the Middle Ages than to today's life standards. We had a small field to work. We did not own that land. It was 11 of us on that piece, a relatively small piece of land, and we worked every centimeter square of it with our own hands and with horses and cows and things like that. It was not yet the time when people would own a tractor or anything. So it was very, very hard work. Animals keep you busy 365 days a year. In the countryside at that time, in that lifestyle, there was work to do for everybody, including children. You would start very early doing all sorts of duties from menial to gradually heavier and heavier, and they had to be done in coordination. We did not even speak Italian at the time. We had the local dialect, and it was a totally different world. We had no electricity, no drinking water, no access to many other things you might think of. And yet, maybe I'm, beautifying it. Maybe I removed some of the discomfort at the time. But because all of us in the family and in the neighboring families that were sort of half a kilometer away or so, we knew each other, of course, very well because contacts were important and helping each other was important. Within the family, there was out of necessity, a sort of coherence. So duties were very strongly divided. I think the women got the most part of it because they would have to do everything to do with the house, the kitchen, the beds, the whatever, taking care of the children, but also working like mad in the countryside, doing the same amount of physical work as the men were doing. The men, of course, had the heaviest parts, but they also had privileges and leisurely moments which the women very rarely ever had. But within these very strong, how should I say, constraints, there was a coherence in this life. And the coherence was that because necessity called for doing things in a coordinated manner, even from the very, very early times that I can remember, we would always have something well defined to do together with the others. I think that was an important part of the education, if you wish. The fact that if you do not build coherence around yourself, you're not going to get anywhere. The level of independence that luckily people in society achieve today tends to push in a direction where you can believe that you can do everything by yourself. And unfortunately, that is not true. So some of this necessity to do things together is part of my upbringing, which I brought with me later on when we left the countryside at my age 11. But these 11 years actually cast a very heavy imprint on my life. And I owe it to my parents and to my family to have given me this opportunity.
So these first 11 years, you had this presence of, you have learned the importance of community and working towards something together and helping each other. What happened after the first 11 years? Did you move out of that village, or did you enter a different education system?
Well, first of all, I forgot to talk about school. See, my father and my mother did not go too much to school. My father went until the sixth grade, and my mother until the third grade. My father was very good at school, and he would have wanted to continue, but his own father told him in very brushed terms that a peasant will always be a peasant, and don't you think you can do crazy things like these. That remained in my father's memory, and he kept it on himself as a duty to do what he could so that his own kids should not go through the same the same route. So I went to school, and that was the first example of mentorship I really got in my life. Although this was a rather remote village in the middle of nowhere, we got blessed by very good school teachers. They would come by bicycle from the big city, cycling for more than an hour in every morning to teach us. And they were fantastic people. First, a lady whom I continued to contact until she passed away, and then a male, and both of them were very instrumental in directing my life. Our class so went on for these 5 years in school, and it was really the beginning of a new life for me. First of all, I learned Italian, uh, and I learned to write and calculate and things like these. I also learned that the people are not equal, their families are not equal, that not everyone had the same sort of feeling and unity. But it was a situation where we were not expected, most of us, to do anything else after elementary school. Uh, in fact, I'm the only one that ever went to university afterwards or did anything like a career. Although many of them achieved goals in other directions, even made much more money than myself, because of we sort of were navigating on the Italian Industrial Revolution. And so, although most of my schoolmates were peasants like myself, many of them quit the land like we did and went on to do other things. But in my case, because my father was so keen on having us kids go to school, and note this, although my father was certainly ahead of his times, he was not sufficiently ahead, so that among the three of us, my elder brother, then my sister, then myself, my elder brother heroically went to high school. My sister, who was the strongest of the three of us, did not. It was not done for a girl to go to school after elementary, even in the best families, illuminated families at that time among peasants. And so my sister remained working at home, and later on became truck driver. And she's well, not just a driver. She has a trucking company,
Wow.
and she and she built herself a career, sort of
Yeah.
of no less importance than my brother and myself. But when my time came up, and it was clear that I would not particularly be good at being another peasant, he decided to quit the land and move on to the city. So when we moved on to the city, one of the outcomes was that I could go to middle school and high school directly in the city. My brother was much older; he was already out of the family, and so I went on to school. And that the school I was encouraged to go to was a technical school, particularly strong at mechanics. Modena is the city where I lived, and Modena is particularly strong in mechanics. Maserati, Ferrari, Lamborghini, they're all there, right? It's a motor valley. And if you did not know how a motor functioned at that time, you were not a human being. You had to know everything. I myself had to mount and unmount my own car and motorbike and everything many times, although I have no particular skills with my hands, but that was part of the culture.
Mhm.
Fact, when I went to school, in school, the Ferrari circle lane was next to the school. And in the boring afternoons where we would take here subjects like physics and friction, we would rather listen to the car, wow, wow, going
Yeah.
around rather than rather than focusing on physics that was anything but interesting. So so much for so technical schools. But I don't know how common this is today, but at that time you could find fantastic teachers spread all over the place, all over the schools, including particularly these technical schools. So in these technical schools, I was impressed by two or three teachers among many. I mean, there were also many that was not worth mentioning, but I was impressed by one teacher of mathematics that struck me for not so much the theorems or whatever, but for the use of logic. Logic is a knife in your hands, and it can cut. How comes it can cut reality from error, and I sort of felt that strongest more than the notions, the method that came from this mathematics teacher. And then there was a teacher of, like we say in Italian, Italian and history. So the literature and stuff, and learning that we are not, in a vacuum, but we grow out of something that has a lot to teach us, and learning on whose shoulders you are growing is extremely important. I picked this up from this Italian teacher, and yet there was then another more scientific person who was very important in my life, and he was teaching physics and nuclear physics, electronics, because with time, by meeting these successive people, I shifted gradually from the original mechanics that my brother had done, so following his path, I shifted over to things that appeared to be more developing at the time, electronics. I used to repair radio sets and TV and things like these. I had a collection of valves at home, which I used to trade with friends and so on. So the shift was gradually towards science, thanks to this teacher number three. So this was my school experience.
How difficult was it for you to make the transition that you made in this big city, coming from this small village? And you said you also in that village already you went to school and learned Italian, but Italian was a new language for you. That was also a barrier. So it seemed like you had in your school life already, you had overcome certain barriers with ease. What was behind all these successes in small steps though?
Yeah. Well, first of all, as you know very well now, having your own kids, and I can watch it in my own grandkids now. Picking up new languages is not really a barrier for kids. It is an opportunity, and they do it in a sort of painless manner. And so it happened with me. I mean, it is natural with my parents, with everybody until they passed away, and even with my sister who's still alive. We talk our own, basic language, dialect. It's Our dialect is somehow, well, similar to maybe Portuguese or something, some strange northern Italian language. It's further away from Italian than French, say. But so what? I mean, if you talk with a dog, you bark. If you talk with a cat, you meow. If you talk with a teacher, you speak Italian. If you talk with parents, you talk whatever. And I'm sure you have similar experience
Yeah.
yourself in many different. So that was a sort of positive and uneventful kind of thing. In fact, I felt very much enriched that through this language I could read, and in fact I remember how treasurable books were at the time. It was very expensive to buy a book. We would only have those books that we should absolutely have. Money was close to zero at that time. We had food because we grew our own, but money was not abundant. So whenever I could lay my hands on a book or even a magazine, I treasured it like letting nobody ever touch it. Right? I remember one teacher donated to me a magazine called Mecánica Popular. It was in Spanish. I mean, I I treasured that magazine for ages afterwards because it revealed something that I had never had an idea about before. But you correctly pointed out moving from the countryside, from this 11 years onwards into the city outskirts, that was a shock. Yes, that was because we had no chickens to look after and no cows to milk every morning and no this and no that. And we had to do completely different things. We even had electricity and water. And, um, and the duty there was to grab the bicycle or catch a bus and go to school and do your best out there. But also to try to help the family because starting a new activity was economically very new and very unsafe. And we had a lot of debts. So besides going to school, all of us kids, my brother was already out, but we did things that could contribute to the family income. So well, well, there was never a culture of going for holidays, no holidays. So whenever there was not school, one could do things, work in the same gas station where my father worked, or doing jobs in the summer, and so on. And of course, that brought myself into contact with a rather different reality. Although seeing a lot more people than before, and knowing many less people than before, because the city has a form of anonymity that I did not know before. See, in the village, everyone I met was supposed to be somebody I knew, and if I did not know, I would still greet respectfully or something. Respect for old people was very important. I always gave my parents the title of Voy, which is like Z in German, uh, to my father and mother, because they were older than I, and I had to pay respect to them. So in the village, everyone I mean, it was not, we were out in the countryside, but wherever I went, I was supposed to know who was there and who whatever. In the city, no. And this anonymity is a shock. How come you meet somebody and he will not say hello, and you're not supposed to know him or her, and he may go his own way, and I have to go my own way, and we ignore each other. Even animals don't do that. So why do? So that kind of parallel can describe the shock. Of course.
Especially to a small kid, right? I mean, it's I guess as an adult you understand or you have heard stories about different city lives and village lives, but as a kid, such a small age, these are really impressionable age.
Well, I have to add something. 11 years old is a small age nowadays. It was not at that time. I mean, at 11 years old, I was, even before, at 8 years old, I was sent on my own, off on a bicycle somewhere, or even on a motorbike, to go and purchase goods for the family. I was not good at working the land, but I was better at shopping. So I was the family shopper. Which brought me maybe in the heart of the village, and I could do this and that, and pay money and look what was best to buy or not to buy, and so on. So by the time I got to age 11, not just myself, all of us were supposed to be young adults. I mean, self-responsible. For instance, I took the motorbike at age 11 and go back to the original village to help people out because they needed still to harvest, and there was a need for so things like this. But the shock was not because of age, but because of culture. So you move yourself from A to B. You are circular, and you have to fit into a square, or vice versa. And so that is that is a form of shock, which being young, you absorb.
Erio, you mentioned that when you were in the school, this technical school that you went to, you also gathered a lot of skills because you moved through different kind of subject areas. So, from electronics also to nuclear energy techniques, and you were building a radio. You also had learned by the virtue of your birth and growing up in village, a lot of people skills and working together.
Mm.
What was at the end of your school years, an 18-year-old Erio Tosatti was thinking where to go and where to steer the career direction?
Yeah. Well, first of all, yes, there is a time in life when you discover that you have to become yourself and you don't know who you are. And the best way to find out who you are is to move your legs, so to speak. Is experiment things. Luckily, at the time, things they could experiment were not perhaps as dangerous as they may seem today. Yeah, of course, you had to start smoking because if you did not smoke, you were not a man. But but you had to learn all kind of trades and things. And for instance, I taught myself what telegraphy. So two. If there was a lot of of shortwave transmission at the time you could listen to, and they meant nothing unless you could interpret them. Things that you teach yourself, strange thing, and you teach yourself how to build a radio, how to speak to other people through your own home built transmitter and receiver and stuff like that. And there were groups of people also, or individuals with whom you would assemble and do these things. So experimenting was done in several directions. Like I wrote jokingly, I even was even recruited by a school teacher to sing in a choir, right? And I ended up singing in this choir with Luciano Pavarotti. In fact, his father his father was the main tenor of the choir, not even himself. Luciano was a pretty quiet fellow. He was only 7 or 8 years older than I. And I would not have told at the time he had been trained as a school teacher. I would not have said at the time that he would become the man he became later on. And it was thanks to this teacher that raised him. This teacher, no one remembers this teacher, Livio Borri. It was him that brought him to become what he was. And I happened to have this teacher as my own teacher, and he recruited me because of my voice or something. And so I went on for several years singing in this choir. That was a that was an interesting experience. Afterwards, I started smoking and I quit, and my voice turned into a man's voice and not a child's voice. So that was that. Or playing rugby, that was another thing. That physical activity was never my piece of cake. But working in I'm sorry, playing in a team is again something that pays off. It rewards you even when you lose. You lose in a sort of team fashion. So these are things that one would experience. But coming back to school, I changed 2 or 3 schools in the process because at one point I thought electronics was more important, and another point I thought maybe nuclear energy will be more important. In fact, nuclear energy, both of them were to become crucial things. So by the time I finished my high school, I was very self-confident with these things, and I thought, okay, what do I do now? What can I do? And I also liked literary and stuff, themes like that. But at that time, it was not possible for somebody in a technical school to first of all, it was not possible to go to university. In the second place, it became possible through an exam, but you had to stay within the bounds of your school of origin. Because my school was technical, I could only do physics or engineering. So I was somehow guided by necessity. I'm grateful for that. Otherwise, God knows what I would have done. and uh, life in humanities, which might also have attracted me, is much more inhuman, I would say, than life in science. In science, there's no money, but you have people that look after you. They adopt you because you share with them some kind of a mission. In the other fields, professions, the story may be quite different. You may achieve much more success. On the other hand, this protective situation may be much more difficult to find. So I had to decide what to do. There were plenty of job opportunities for at the time. It was very easy to find a job outside of the academia. In fact, only the foolest of us decided to to go to university and things like these. The shrewdest ones went into doing things because it was really plenty of opportunity. But because of this impression I had gotten from my teachers and because of certain inclination and curiosity, I think of all the things that I had learned, the interest for nature. I mean, physics in Greek means nature, so interest in nature always persisted, and so I thought, okay, instead of going into a big job in Milan, I had to, if you take a serious job, I had to go to the big city and so on. I will stay in the small city, take on a local job because I need to support myself, but I'll go to university if I can. And it turned out I could do that, although in retrospect, I'm not sure I would recommend it to another myself because doing a full-time job and a full-time university study leaves very little time for your life. In fact, for even for your sleep. So I entered the entered the a technician's job and the university physics course at the same time at Modern University. But that was a deliberate choice because I thought that was more attractive for me than doing other things.
Seems like also at that point hard work because you were also parallelly managing a day job and also having your studies on the side at the University of Modena. Also, one important skill might have also have expertised, which is time management, because it's not, as you mentioned, it's not easy to do both. And also, to our some of our listeners might not also come from financially stable background, and they might have to have try, at least if their curiosity allows them, to try their hand at studying physics or study having to do research. What do you suggest to them how to manage this phase?
I don't know. I don't know because the world is very different nowadays, and what I did at that time, whether I would recommend it or not, would not be feasible today. So what I did, I would go to classes in the morning at the university. They would let me, first of all, the people that hired me within the university. It was physiology, so they were doctors. They were illuminated doctors in a way. They would let me go to university and attend, but then I would come back to work in the afternoon, and I would work through the night, through the evening. So I could do things in the evening where no one else was around, but I could do some of the circuits that I was supposed to wanted to do, and also I could do some of the experiments. Some of the experiments were physical experiments and physiology, and but the doctors could not find anybody to do the experiments on. we, there was a trial with the city with the city cops but it did not work very well. They came only once, and they said we will never come again because they had to run on a treadmill and they could not stop. It was under my control whether they would stop or not, and I would only stop once their heartbeat got above 150, and so that put a strain on some of them. Um, so to do these experiments, I would stay on in the night and get some of my friends to come. We would play cards and maybe even drink and stuff and do some of the experiments during. So this is not something that I would recommend for people to do in the future. So working, and then I would go home very early morning and sleep to a few hours before going to school. And so the time management was worked out like that. I guess only somebody who's age 20 and rather strong could tolerate something like that. But it was rewarding in many ways because through this trick of having friends and coming and doing the experiments together, I had some form of social life after all, plus the university. Also, the university was not very demanding in the beginning because it was physics I had already done in the high school. Several of the, in fact, it was even sort of disappointing. Say, hey, but all of this I knew it already. So what am I doing here? But then things changed, and the second part of physics became really strong and really heavy. So that the amount of work required became very strong. I do not know what advice I would give to people nowadays. I don't think they would ever find a similar setup or reality. But I mean, it gave me a lot of input. It gave me certainly my family some money first of all, but also I learned what kind of environments I would like or not. Because if you work as a technician in the medical field, you have a great advantage that you can do things that the doctors do not know how to do, and they need you. They need you very much, and the field needs a lot. I built a cardiotachometer and I published it. My second paper is this cardiotachometer, which nobody could buy at the time. It didn't exist. But you could, click, and get an electronic printout of your heartbeat, which I tested during the night in these night with friends, right? So if I wanted to stay in that field, there would have been quite something to do. I did not like the environment. So I'm sure the environment, the medical environment in physiology, whatever, is much better today, is much different other places. But at that time, what would drive me would be the attraction of a field, curiosity, and being with people whom I admired, whom I liked. And frankly, I could not find so many in that area. So negative experiences are more instructive than positive ones. Somebody in Italy said that experience is just the sum of my errors. He did not say errors, but okay. So I immediately understood that field was. I did not know what I wanted to do, but I know what I did not want to do, and gradually you find that out. And that the answer to what I wanted to do continued when I could approach my degree and fire myself away from that job and go to CERN Geneva as a summer student. That was proper fundamental physics, which I was also studying at university, and that was a ray of light in my life, a positive shock.
How did that happen? The summer internship. How did you apply for it? And what was the process at that time? And how easy was it to leave a stable financial income behind and go for that opportunity?
First of all, life had continued, and my family's needs were less stringent as by 1966, when I was already 23, and I was ready to get my degree. The physics I was studying for my master's at that time was high energy physics. In Italy, high energy physics was everything at that time. There was basically nothing else. people that did other structure of matter had emigrated to the US. Enrico Fermi was one of them. Ugo Fano, many others had left because they had Jewish connections or whatever, so they had evaporated. High energy physics had survived, and if you start your training in high energy, in fundamental physics, as they call themselves, you you get you get fascinated by the sort of unitary vision that at least was around at the time. You begin, you have a beautiful Lagrange, and you have a field theory, you have something, and you as a theorist, you go on with the wings of mathematics, which we inherited from Dirac, and that is once you understand what happens in the heart of the heart of the heart, will lead you to understand everything. This is completely wrong. It's completely wrong because, I mean, as Anderson later argued in More is Different, science does not proceed like that. Science is like an onion. It's made of shells, and understanding the inner shell does not lead you to understand the next shell. There's a new theory, and there are independent discoveries, independent paradigms that come up. So understanding the heart of the heart of the heart of things is extremely important, but will not lead you to understand everything. That mistake is. The other thing is that once you get more senior into science, you begin to see that there is a broader sense of unity in science, but you have to have enough experience to see it. So you have to fly a little higher to see that there's not just a little valley and a big mountain, but there's a chain of, and then there is a planet, and then there is, and so on. So, but at that time, when I took the course in structure of matter, I said, "What the hell is this?" There is a phenomenon like this, and I have a little calculation that explains it. Then something like that, and I have another little calculation completely different that explains it. What the hell is this? This is not a proper meal. It's a street food. I don't like it. So I sold my book after passing that exam, swearing I would never do this again. Life convinced me later on that this was not the case. But I went through, first of all, trying to do fundamental physics, and in CERN you could apply. I think you still can apply for summer internships at CERN. I was encouraged to do that by my mentor at the time at Modern University, Daniele Amati, and other people around him, great people. And they said, well, okay, you would like to be a theorist, but you better stick your nose into some experiments and to see what is going on and so on. And if you get such an internship, they actually pay you not grandly, but enough to live in Geneva, Switzerland. So I landed in this place full of incredibly famous and profound people, and that was as I say, a ray of light, and also a very important experience in the kind of feeling you would have in an open and strongly motivated physics community. Although working in a group that at the time had 300 people is not rewarding. Many people that were I considered to be very good were confined to doing some menial apparatus. I thought I thought I could do even better than them as a technician. Although in the process of showing how to do it better, I ruined completely a piece of apparatus. And the other technician said, "Oh, look, you better escape to France because tomorrow morning when Carlo Rubbia comes, he will kill you." Okay. Well, he did not kill me, but okay. That was enough to convince me that theory was perhaps better than experiment. So if I were to do experiment or anything, I would not like to do it in a 300 people group. Nowadays, they're even bigger. Frankly, I admire those that can fly in such a big flock. Okay, I'm accustomed to flying flockwise, but even building flocks, but not that large. I don't know Anyway, in certain activities you have to do it, and this is what they do, and praise to them. And besides Carlo Rubio, who did not kill me, there was Jack Steinberger. Both of them, by the way, later Nobel Prize winners. Jack Steinberger was just a fantastic guy. If I had bumped into him first, maybe I would have stayed in in high energy experiments. So I had to do theory, and then I went to try my luck at the University of Rome, spending several months there to see what I could smell. The best theory in Italy was done in Rome, and there, yeah, it was a very nice environment. But a lot of people like myself, all hungry for a team, all hungry for something to do, and no opportunity. High energy physics in 1966 was theory. I mean, was not at a high point. There was only field theory was at a minimum. No one had discovered anything. They were doing dispersion relations, phenomenology. That did not look appetizing. I mean, it looked like the barrel had been scraped to the bottom. So I decided to switch to another more burgeoning field. And I was lucky immediately after my degree to find an opportunity for doing that in Pisa, where somebody had just come back from the US. So I switched to. So you see, that was a defeat in some sense, because I would have really loved to do fundamental physics and so on, but I had to take stock of the failure to find something suitable, and I was forced by events, but I accepted it gracefully to move into something else with the opportunity of somebody who really welcomed me into this other field. If I had not found that welcoming, maybe I would have changed again into something else. So it was a renewal for me to move on to Pisa Scuola Normale with Franco Bassani, who was the new mentor, and I started in condensed matter physics, rebuying back the book I had
That you had sold before. Finding the old notes on the top of the.
Oh yeah, even some swear words here and there. It was Simon's book.
Yeah. But what drew you into doing a PhD at that time? And also, was there any plan B when you were at at CERN and thinking about there is hunger in you scientifically, and you were moving, trying to
Yeah.
find a new way?
Yes, I remember applying for a Fulbright fellowship, but I failed. So if I had gotten that, it would have led me yet in another direction. So I explored whatever I could explore, much to the negative impression that somehow my parents had, because all these opportunities would have brought me God knows where. They never, I must acknowledge, they're really great people. They never made it, weight on me the fact that I would leave Modena and leave home. At that time, going away from your home place was not was not a sign of success. It was a sign of failure. It was emigration, which people did when they were really desperate, and we were not really desperate. And so, why would somebody quit the family, abandon the parents, abandon the city, and go here and there? They forced themselves to accept this, and it was a shock. For sure, it was a shock for them more than for me. For me, it was a sort of natural way to grow. For them, was something they would never have imagined in their upbringing, because they would say, "Well, if this son goes to school, he will be very successful. He will build a big family. We will have everybody here, right? We'll have the grandchildren and stuff." And no, this guy is evaporating somewhere. Also, not building a family, because when you move from A to B to C, no family. But they never made it heavy on me. Of course, I tried to go back every time I could, in all circumstances I could, even later on when I had a family, always going back home and so on. But but certainly for them it was a big shock. So I tried my opportunities, and having found one in Pisa was not too bad. I mean, in Pisa you could go with a few hours by car or whatever, so I could still keep in contact with them. So I tried to balance things, and even later on, all the rest of my life has been sort of trying to be independent, not having to go back because that was my home city or something. But certainly, when I married, I had 160, people invited in Modena, in my hometown, in the same place and whatever. So trying to do things half, half, half one way and half another way.
And
So
this part of your life also rings close to many people, and also it rings close to home, because I also have seen families like that, and maybe some part of it I also experienced in it still exists in parts of the world and pockets of different countries, similar mentality. And what you described is not, it used to happen. Maybe in Western countries it has changed a lot, but other parts of the world it still exists. And finding this your own way, growing into something where your curiosity brings you, is one of the kind of directing compass in your life. And that did take you to, later, first to CERN, and then to Pisa, Scuola Normale, where you met your PhD mentor, Franco Bassini. What was it that attracted you about condensed matter physics? And what was your research questions and how you dealt with it? If you can explain in a simple way.
as I got into doing the things that Franco sort of brought me in. There was optical properties of solids. Of course, he was a man of semiconductors, and he had picked up the semiconductors working at Urbana Champaign, and so in fact, working with people who had been trained under Fermi, and so bringing back some of the and Fred Seitz, so bringing back some of the European science that had immigrated to the U.S. So he was doing the theory of optical properties and band structure, which at the time was very novel. I realized that, I mean, the world is matter is full of behaviors of things that I always accepted and never questioned, never understood. Why is this conducting or insulating? Why is this? Why is that? All these questions, why, you learn when you grow up that you accepted them. You think you know, but you know because you accept them, but not because you understand them. And this lack of understanding of essentially everything strikes you as something which is not less fundamental than not understanding the structure of the nucleus or the quarks or whatever. The fact is that we understand nearly nothing, and there is an infinite space around us to be understood. Uh, then you have the embarrassment of choice, right? Where do I begin? I mean, there's an infinite amount of things to be understood, and where do I begin? And you take advantage of whoever is leading you through this, like Virgil leading you through hell, uh, finding a path in this hell of ununderstood things and discovering jewels all along your path. Interesting people, interesting phenomena, interesting things that you have to and by the time you you go through the Divine Comedy, by the time you go through the step, you're meeting one element, another, one phenomenon, another, and so on. You begin to understand what humanity, in the case of Dante's Inferno and Virgil and what on, and you begin to understand this greater unity there is in nature that had to do with physics. Eventually, you can sort of uh, raise yourself a little higher than just every nitty gritty, and there is a bigger common denominator, which you and you acquire confidence in sort of what you do next to understand something. And what you do next to understand something for a theorist is to build a model, which means you give yourself a bias. So that is the very common exercise that everyone in science, one way or another, the sweet way or the hard way, has to learn. Life is complicated. Nature is complex. There are infinitely many elements in everything. And how do you understand how to move in this hell? Okay, somebody is taking you by the hand and telling you, hey, look, this area is very interesting. I know A, B, C, but I have no idea what explains D, which is the crucial thing. So you get brought to the point, and then it's up to you. What do you do? Well, you try to build a model, and the model has to be something where you throw away nearly everything, right? And but what is left can be solved. So that's the exercise, and condensed matter is fantastic at teaching you this, because this is what you to do all these things that that Simon's book contains, explaining A, explaining B, explaining, is a series of such exercises like Dante's comedy. Is an episode, another episode. You see that sinner, that other sinner, all the different sins. The different sins have different origin, different explanations, but yet they're part of a more complex humanity. The same thing, you solve them, you build the model to explain A, you build the model to explain B, and then you see that there is a model can speak to the other and so on, and you learn, if you're fortunate, if you're lucky, and also if you are good enough, and this is where the difficulty is. So all the geniuses I've met in my life, and I've met a certain number of them, Anderson being one of them, but many others and several others, and what they do is then they know the answer before before they prove it. Their nose is long enough that it can tunnel through phenomena and guess what is at the heart of it, and then the rest of the exercise, which is to build something that can be solved so that you can prove to the others that this is the explanation. To the point that even when the proof is wrong, they would be proud that they had the right answer, even though they had the wrong proof, because because that was the priority. Most of us non-genius people cannot do that, and we have therefore to go to the shop and rely on other geniuses to build this and that model, to present this and that. But we are like in my farm childhood, a coral bank, right? We are little creatures, and we deposit our own little contribution to the thing, and eventually it grows and it solidifies what a few people that have a much longer arm or nose propose to us. And in doing this exercise, condensed matter is unbeatable, because as proven by many examples, including the Higgs bosons and other things, the exercise of repeatedly having to gather the fundamental explanation behind this and that and the other makes you a sort of athlete in this exercise, and maybe sometimes you can jump in even higher, even beyond your own fence, into the neighboring fence, which leads to cross fertilization. Interdisciplinary now is a buzzword, but it is a real phenomenon which can take advantage of good schooling that trains you not to be uh, completely and totally absorbed by a single by a single line. So that's the thing that can be said.
Interesting point of view, and coming from you, it's a it's a kind of inspiration for others, that to try to at least understand this big, vast, complex world in a small way and get hopeful that they find some connections. You talked about finding jewels on the path, and your recent research has found you have found jewels in these kind of topics, which involves fundamentals of the physics of friction and friction under extreme conditions, and also the motion of small objects on the surfaces. uh, so you also recently, after your retirement, you were holding this emeritus professor position. You got two consecutive ERC grants, which only talks about the excellent physics that you are doing even at this stage of your life. Talk to the young researchers about some of these wonders of physics that still keep you motivated and still keep you going after these questions and kind of trying to find the connection between different things.
Tough questions, yes. Uh, well, first of all, the pleasure, the jewels are difficult to describe because the jewels are human, they are emotions. You look at something and all of a sudden you realize something, you understand something, you have proof that the pleasure you have at that moment is difficult to describe. I mean, we are in the same trade, you and I. How would you explain to somebody why we do it and what is that grain of pleasure that you find when you realize you have understood something? Uh, I do not know how to assimilate this pleasure, but this is the fundamental of it. And if you have to explain to somebody why this was so important, then it becomes diminishing because you say, well, what do I care whether a surface will facet or not, and why is it so important that that if I turn on quantum mechanics, the friction will not be exactly the same. Maybe it will be smaller, maybe it will be larger. What comes out of it? Why do you do it? And uh, some people that confuse science with technology expect that I would tell them, well, this is going to be useful for this, and you will build a better bus brake because it will do this and that and the other. And sometimes colleagues, but many of ourselves, and sometimes you pretend you are uh, you are doing it for this so that you get some support or some money or some recognition or something. But this is not the real reason. It's because you want to move on understanding things. Uh, of course, without the understanding, there is no science and there is no technology. And in fact, this touches on something which is artificial intelligence nowadays, because to some extent, among the many pillars that we have in science, it is experiment, theory, simulation. Right? A table can already stand on three legs. On two, it does not, but on three, it does. And now artificial intelligence appears to be the fourth leg. However, I find that artificial intelligence certainly prevailing and absolutely not to be ignored. I mean, we have to dive into it, but stunning because it allows you, for the time being, to obtain results without understanding. So you simply look at data and you manage your data, you manipulate them, and in some instances, at least at the moment, you can manipulate them in such a way that they give you an answer, and this answer has a high probability of being correct without you having understood any bloody thing. So that is that is that
You
is
cannot tunnel your nose through anything.
right. So I I find myself at a loss. It even reflects in prizes given by the Nobel Committee that prizes are given correctly, presumably, to individuals and scientists who have obtained results using this shortcut, solving problems that are of importance in the complete spirit of Nobel's mandate, of course, but uh, contrary to the past, not based on a specific understanding, not apparently based on anyway. So so that But so the contributions, uh, I I um, I feel myself like a bumblebee. So I fly from a flower to another, and I try to understand what are the flowers that need that can be visited, where I can understand something, and not so much make a contribution, but make my own path at it, and try to see whether the model or not the model, and so on. And so this is taking me to move from A to B to C and so on. And I continue doing it so much as so much as anaglyphic data permit. There's something I would not pass upon before we say goodbye, and this is the fact that that um, building groups and building a community, building research society, and joint effort with everyone in the world, particularly with people from communities that do not have proper upbringing, is, in my view, perhaps even more important than doing the science itself. The science itself is a selfish activity. Although it may be painful, it may me keep me awake at night, whatever you want, but it is something of selfish origin. The other half of what we, I feel, must do is for others, namely to keep and build the society together. Because either we fly together or we do not fly at all. And it the reason I came to Trieste and I quit Rome or whatever, and I spent part of my life sort of around here with you girls and guys, uh, is because this is at least as important as my scientific curiosity. Uh, I'm really proud and really grateful that life gave me the opportunity to be in that particular position. It's so lucky that Abdul Salam and Paolo Budinis did not find anybody else, although they tried very hard in the 1970s to find someone else to build their group. Eventually, they had to come to poor little me, and I was foolish enough to propose myself coming here with a group of people, and some of them were really world leaders. Michele Parrinello been many times a candidate for Nobel Prize winning. I hope he will be considered in the next. Uh, uh, the opportunity to do this really came as a gratifying bonus in my life. Like I said, I even took it to the point to serve as a director of ICTP for a year and a half between when Miguel Virasoro left. Uh, to direct such a big institute is such a bonus, such a great thing. On the other hand, it is administration, and that is not for everybody. It is certainly not for me. So I was so grateful again when I could pass it on to somebody else, and I could sort of go back into the ranks and serve on the daily on the daily as another the daily boy in the court, rather than being in charge of the whole thing, because you have to have a talent for everything that you do. If there is I would call this the Tosatti angle. There is an angle between what you should do and can do and what you try to do. And and many of us have a large angle, and that is a source of the difficulty in our lives. I'm trying to. I still have an angle, but I'm trying to zigzag across the right direction. So the average angle, I try to keep it close to zero. Everyone has a lot of talents, and you
But
simply you have to.
Erio, you say all this, but the whole community, scientific community of the international scientific community, and also particularly also what you bought to Trieste in this institution building, like all these condensed matter groups at SISSA, at ICTP, you are the main figure behind it, and accept you that couldn't have been done. And that means that a place where many of us cherish and find our way to do science, find ourselves accepted and feel warm and welcome, feeling like a community that would not have been present. So we owe you a lot for all the contributions you did for this institution building and the admin role, even though you didn't like them, you took at the most difficult times. Somebody whom we know very closely, somebody who is the connection between us, who is, you are the postdoc mentor of my postdoc mentor. That connection is Professor Sandro Scandalo. And Sandro had sent one question for you, which is why do you not take more leadership administrative role, even though you are offered many times? And I think you answered part of this question here. So this actually, this is one of the another pillar that we are talking about now, the institution building. What do you think that in these all these years in building this for the community, why is this important, and why, if opportunity offers somebody, because we are all, as you said, like scientific excellence, it's all nice and well, but it's kind of self-motivated. We do it for a little bit selfish reason, but you kind of took time from that, even though that was your core interest, and devoted your time to building this. What do you think that influenced you to take that decision?
My upbringing was like that, to do things well, to have satisfaction in what you do, but to do it with others and not against the others. Um, Also, you have to realize when I grew up, where I grew up was basically a developing country and not very strongly developing in the early times. So I saw, always saw, everyone that catered to what we could do at ICTP and SISSA and the Trieste system altogether as another myself. I heard, by the way, a similar story from Abdul Salam himself. Growing up in near Lahore or whatever, he quickly made it to the big places and the big goals which he pursued in his life quite determinedly. But at the same time, the other half of himself saw the rest of the world in the situation where he was as a kid, and to offer an opportunity to such kids worldwide is immensely important. The world is changing, the opportunities are changing, everything is changing, but underdevelopment and lack of proper upbringing, scientific and not only scientific, right, is continuing in the world. And so the scope for places and missions like that of ICTP continue. Not only this, but I think it's a common feeling. I'm not religious at all. I don't believe anything special, but believing in mankind and helping each other does not need a religion. And I see, and also liking, being attracted to sharing what one does in a similar manner does not require to grow up on a farm. There are many other people, like Sandro Scandolo, for example, who grew up in a different environment, but yet he feels exactly the same urge and the same mandate. There are and there will always be people of this kind, which I think the community must treasure and sort of count upon. It does not, at any given time, it never looks so particularly favorable. It does not look easy. It does not look that it can continue diabatically. God knows what is looming ahead. But I think this feeling of doing one half of what one can do for oneself and doing the other half to help the community is rather a good rule, which will still continue to find followers in in the future. It's not a profession. I know it sounds more like a mission, so it sounds more like a religious creed, but it has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with humanity.
Thanks, Erio. These are truly insightful words, and we will keep in mind going ahead all this wisdom that you offered today. The another pillar that we had talked about initially, that is mentorship, and you had trained generation of physicists, and also you had been trained by postdoc mentor P.W. Anderson, who was a Nobel laureate, and you personally have known several of the Nobel laureates, and to name a few, there were Duncan Haldane, there were Brian Josephson, and many others. Could you please talk to what you had learned from your mentor, like Phil Anderson, and what you hope to impart to all the students and postdocs you have come in contact with?
Interesting, very interesting and deep question. Um, so I've learned that not only from them, throughout, that you learn everything, that you pick up everything through, should I say, love? I mean, human communication, but of the warmest kind. I think love is not a bad word in this context. So I loved these school teachers that I had. I loved these three professors, and that from which I pick up something. I really feel like they were my other parents, brothers, sisters. I loved Daniela Amati, who is still around and who brought me into high energy physics at University of Modena. Later became even my director here in SISSA, and all these people, Phil Anderson, Duncan Haldane. Uh, these are all people with whom the contact was first of all human. So because science is culture before being technicality, but mentorship is a human relationship before being science and culture and everything, and you have to feel the protective wings of somebody in order to move into a very challenging exercise like this. Not everyone is, a courage equals to infinity. But if you feel that if somebody that is encouraging you to do something, he could made it, maybe he or she could made it, maybe I will also be able to try something like that. And it was the human contact with all these people. So with Brian Johnson, we would go to have Indian food all over the place in Cambridge. Probably the worst kind of Indian food, extremely peppered or whatever. Uh, with Patrick Fazekas, another postdoc friend of mine, with Phil Anderson, we did many things. Going for lunch every day at the Eagles, and then talking and chatting and really talking about everything, and and then the science inputs coming in here and there like grains of salt. Yeah? Uh, I remember once upon a time at lunchtime at the Eagles with Phil Anderson, he said, superconductivity is just a quantum melted charge density wave. Now, I had just learned what charge density wave were, and the insulators, static insulators, stupid insulators, but quantum melting can take something static and stupid and break it up, like it liquefies helium. In the same way, if it liquefies the stupid electron pairs in the charge density wave, you get a super. This was said over lunchtime, and it is an absolute truth. You would not, if you write it down anywhere, you would be criticized by God knows who, and it would still be, a statement without proof. But in the end, it is the absolute truth of what is going on, and you pick it up in these human relationships, and not easily elsewhere. So what I was lucky at is having used my legs moving from A to B to C, from flower to flower, from a place to another. I was lucky enough to meet these people, bump into these people, be associated with these extraordinary people, and to get this pollen, get this incredible input that really brings you to shape up your way of understanding nature. So you try to visualize things in a more qualitative manner, trying to understand what may be going on, creating a picture in your head of what may be going on, and later thinking, how do I build a model? Whose model do I buy? What do I do? And so on. And it was a kind of similar feeling with Heini Rohrer, Alex Müller, particularly. Alex, I was in IBM Zurich, and we were talking about other things to do with graphite intercalates and so on. But once I told him that I thought quantum melting of a ferroelectric would be interesting, and he sort of zoomed up his ears like this. Um, and he was interested what I was saying, and he said, "I have an example of your thing, strontium titanate." He did everything with strontium titanate, but what he had not told me was that he had the high TC in the drawer of his thing. He was keeping it there because he had not the freedom to publish it before it would be approved by powers high up. Eventually, he came up with the publication of high TC after I left and so on, but he clearly was interested in superconductivity. He clearly was interested in quantum melting. In fact, he had the idea that high TC was the quantum melting of a Young Teller solid, and I think he remained with that belief up to the end of his life. Uh, so these qualitative ideas that you and I was telling this story about the quantum melting of electrons over lunchtime once again in the sun of richly Cohn, and the most important things get communicated in this sort of friendly family sort of manner, which is based on the fact that we had a very good human contact. And so I would encourage everyone to were it for nothing else, to pursue this human contact, which is really what makes I think physics and our type of community so very attractive. Which also, as I recall what I said earlier on, the fundamental reason I stayed in physics and not go into more profitable environments, that would have been, from the purely human viewpoint, much less interesting, much less attractive.
And talking about your contribution, apparently you have also contributed in the Carp-Parinello method, because as you jokingly had said many times, that both of them were at Trieste at the time, and even not. Could you please share with our listeners how did you contribute?
Yes. See, Parinello and I are like brothers, and we had already gone through the coming to Trieste. He from Messina, I from Rome, blah blah blah, and in the group building we succeeded to attract Roberto Carr and Annabella Selloni. Annabella Selloni had been my first student in Rome, and having attracted both of them to Trieste, I thought that was it. They would never escape, right? You attract a couple and have a job for both of them. Imagine this. They will stay here, and I have done my duty to build the house. Of course, I was wrong as always, but that so with Roberto and Michele, we would spend a lot of hours together. Because Michele had come back from the US, so with computational method, we done with the great Anis Rahman. Anis Rahman, really a great man. And Roberto had come from Lausanne, having learned density functional theory and stuff in part with Baldereschi, in part with other people like this. And these were totally orthogonal worlds. I mean, one could not talk to the other. One was entirely classical and mumbo jumbo, computing, and the other one was the density another mumbo jumbo computing of an orthogonal type. But we spent hours and evenings together. And I remember at the bar in ICTP thinking, how wonderful it would be if we could do, if we could do a simulation of silicon going from solid to liquid. It goes from semiconducting to metallic. How the hell do I do that? There is no potential that can describe it for a classical simulation. On the other hand, the electronic calculations are impossible. And this is how the situation remained until I left for a sabbatical in Zurich with Alex Müller and Heidi Rohr and so on. Uh, if I because I left, I think I left them alone. They concentrated on the stuff, and eventually they came up with this wonderful idea. And once I was, I think I was in Zurich. I think it was about this time of the year in 1985. I got a phone call. At that time, you would not make phone calls so easily. They were expensive exercises, but a phone call from Michele saying, "Hey, we bumped into this thing. It's fantastic. It was the most elegant thing we ever bumped upon. It is this and that and the other." And I say, fantastic. And I was thrilled. I invited both of them. They came to Zurich and gave a talk in May 1985, long before the paper was out. And it was clear they had found something. It was clear they found something, and that was actually how eventually Michele and Roberto were attracted into. Michele himself was attracted at IBM Zurich because of the knowledge because of the impression he made on Heini Rohrer, who was in charge at the time. Heini was a great man. Apart from the Nobel Prize for STM, he was really a great builder. Once again, one of these people that, like Salam, they do two things. So they do Nobel Prize level science at the same time as keeping building a group, building a group. And so they came up and gave this talk, and it was clear they had done it. And I think I rightly claim a stake in this because if I had been in Trieste, I would have disturbed them. They did it by working through the night and using the only computer we had bought for them and so on, and that kind of concentration, human before being scientific, between the two of them actually made the thing. And a good reaction has two reagents and the catalyzer, but the catalyzer can even be away, right?
Yeah. It has done its work before that.
Right. So no, I think they entirely deserve. I mean, it's a great discovery, and I think the community and various committees around the world should recognize this because it is going. It is having a huge impact, even to this day, in other fields and in chemistry and other fields. Yes.
Erio, I would like to also ask one more question about people and learnings from them. You also were close friends and are close friends with Neville Mott, Brian Pippert, Volker Hein, and many others. And including yourself, the way you approach science and all these people approach science, what makes the difference? Who does end up in doing excellent science and who do not go up the ladder? Or what are the learnings basically from, if you can impart some of the lessons that this group of people are implementing or learning and have learned that some of the other people might be lacking?
There are many elements. I mean, I can only take a crude guess at this. I see the first thing is curiosity and motivation. So if I've met people that I consider to be geniuses, but without curiosity and without motivation, uh, they they will not use that talent that they have. Talent is important, but it is not the driving force. Um, so motivation is the driving force. I've met people that don't have an infinite amount of talent, but they have a strong motivation, and they can contribute to their best to the advancement of things. It need not be splendid discovery, but it can be the contribution to their best. Uh, all these people that I quoted and other people, they're all exquisitely different from each other. You would be hard pushed to find what is the common denominator. The common denominator may be small, but certainly the the end of the business is those that stand up at the end of the day are people that have a motivation either from curiosity or from, say, some kind of social drive. Very, very rarely are there other driving forces. Money certainly not. Having eminent positions in society and power certainly not. Okay. Uh, in fact, many of these people have always been on the verge of, Um, I remember Brian Josephson. We were going out with him and said, "Hey, here I am. You guys talk physics. I cannot get any ideas. Next year, the Trinity College will fire me." But the next year he got a Nobel Prize. Uh, the so it takes motivation and curiosity and to accompany your talent. Of course, when the talent comes in and it is of a special kind, it's like you get bigger wings and you can fly higher. And it's a gift of nature if you have it, and it can take you places. But I, and in many other cases, that Brian Pippard or Volker Heine or Heini Rohrer and so on, it goes together with this feeling, with this attitude I described of building and helping and keeping people together. Even Phil Anderson himself, who is considered to be some kind of basilisk, some kind of a person who can whom you can be afraid of, you could be afraid of because he could defend himself so strongly against attackers, was infinitely soft and infinitely delicate with younger people and infinitely sort of devoted to listening. Although when he spoke, as TV Ramakrishnan described, no one would understand because he was he was a mumbler, and so he would mumble something, and he would need an interpreter to figure out what that mumbling meant. In fact, TVR describes how he became the king of interpreters of what Phil Anderson would say because he could understand after some exercise what that mumbling meant. But there is in all these people that left such a big mark an attitude of helping and of collaborating and of sharing whatever understanding they had with people that could try to share the same enjoyment like they had.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about TVR being the interpreter. At ICTP, we have attended lots of talks. Some talks are good, some talks are not so comprehensible at points. I remember you being the interpreter of Mumbler many times and trying for at least to the students and postdocs, it felt like you were interpreting what by your asking question, to bringing us together in that talk at that moment. Your question clarified many things about the talk at points. So thank you for being that. Erio, we need a part two of our conversation, maybe at some later stage, maybe some other day. We haven't talked about many of the important things also on your career journey. You had some collaborations with Germany, and especially at the University of Stuttgart and University of Strasbourg, and then you had some collaboration with the Stanford and many other institutes over the years, and we'll keep it concise at this today. And but we have two more things to do before I let you go. I would like to call it fun trivia about my guests. So I'll ask you some small questions
Hmm.
about yourself. Okay, so it starts with what are your hobbies?
Uh, 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 my hobbies are probably related to going back to the childhood nature. So I go and pick up wild vegetables to eat. I
Mhm.
used to do this as a child to feed the rabbits that my mother was raising to gather some money. But I discovered that many of these wild vegetables are quite good for myself and the family to eat. So I go around parks around here, sometimes with even a knife in my hand, which people might wonder what this old man is doing with a knife around the park. And I pick up some of these wild vegetables. That's a rather unusual hobby. I cycle and do chores and things. I still love shopping for the family, so I go, and that is not a particularly. Uh, I used to like movies very much. I was a cinema critic in school, but I don't find that I have too much time for it. I prefer to read books and novels and stuff like that. Um, uh, Having five grandkids, they are an incredible hobby.
Yeah.
Now, one of them, Chloe, is in New York City, and I see her very seldom. I will see her in 2 3 weeks, and I'm thrilled to see her. She's a genius of 13. Um, and going to the same school, in the same school as Enrico Fermi's daughter put put his daughter in 1938. But I have others in Milan, and I have two here in Trieste, and these kids um, certainly occupy a huge. And so with them, I go in the backyard and I go here and with them I look at ants up the trees and how to find a stone from a different color one from the other and I find them incredibly curious and much better listening than giving them some plastic toys or whatever it is that the children get given these days. So taking them by hand and looking at the pieces of nature around is a big hobby these days. Of course, music is fundamental. I can still not live detached from music.
Do you
And
still sing sometimes?
well, as you can tell from my voice, I'm not uh, I'm not such a good singer any longer. As I tell my friends, I only begin singing now after the first wine bottle. In Modena,
Good
we
to
have
know.
a sparkling wine called Lambrusco in Modena, which also Pavarotti was very fond of,
Mhm.
and and it showed. And so after you sort of have indulged a little bit and so on, you feel like singing. But I find that the attitude to sing that was very strong in the fields. When you work in the fields,
Mm.
many people keep themselves company by singing. This attitude to sing is now disappearing because people are obliterated. People's attention is taken by other things. So you hear more and more artificial music or even music, uh, but right, you're surrounded by music. How do you get rid of it? I don't know, but very very rarely can you hear anybody sing and whistle. Of course, all my grandchildren are being taught to whistle.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's not done anymore, right?
Ah,
But it is important when we lose each other in the supermarket. If I whistle the family tune,
yeah, yeah.
I can find people that go, well. I thought well, my daughter was lost in Aachen in Germany, and and we did not know where she was, and with the whistle we could find her. Mm.
Wow. Yeah, I
She found a place in the supermarket where she could lay her hands on this thing. She was, like 2 or 3 years old, and and it was rather important for her.
yeah, yeah,
So
good.
I find it difficult to describe. I like to swim, very much like to swim. So we're by the sea, and as in 1 month or so, the temperature will raise upon the critical temperature of 22 centigrades, and then I will certainly do a lot of swimming. That is a pleasure. And if you swim in the sea, it's not just a swimming pool where it is a stupid exercise, but in the sea you watch at the bottom. And the bottom tells me wonderful things and also very bad things, that everything is changing. Things that I used to see are disappearing. The global warming is showing up very, very intensely, both in the vegetable grasses that I collect and in the bottom of the sea. There are things, Pinna nobilis, there are various species that have completely disappeared. And I see no other reason than the shift in water temperature, and also proliferation of various species that now appear around that are eating up all the food, and they are so it's an interesting thing to swim around and observe, and once again nature in another context. And depending, there are many other things. Seeing friends, but I cannot abstain from going up to work. I have two offices, one in SISSA and one in ICTP, and I keep going because there are the student and the postdoc, and we have to share our rituals. So we go for lunch together. Lunch is a very important
Yeah,
time.
I have experienced that many times. And you still have your own balsamic vinegar and salt and
Of
this
course,
bag.
I was forgetting that nobody would ever permit. Of course, one of my hobbies is balsamic vinegar. I brought to Trieste the only, I believe, or the only balsamic vinegar production in the whole in the whole of the city of in the whole the city of Trieste. It's not for sale; it's just for friends, and that is what I tell. Yes.
Yeah, I still remember that vividly from our lunch together.
Well, of course, I bring my own lunch. If I had just the ICTP or SISSA's cafeteria lunch, I would probably be dead by now. Sorry about. I bring my own, right,
Hmm.
wherever in this
Yeah,
yellow. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I That's also a very memorable thing from the our lunchtime. Um, you mentioned reading books. Can you mention two or three books which had impacted your life greatly, or you still remember and left a great impact later on?
There are so many that I would be embarrassed. I remember Disturbing the Universe of Freeman Dyson. That's a very remarkable book. There is uh, a cartoon book, The Mouse, describing in cartoons,
Mhm.
not just a book describing the Holocaust I'm looking around to
Yeah.
the where it is, and it seems to have disappeared, but it must be somewhere
Yeah.
here. There is a book that by a doctor, a former doctor of Mao Zedong, describes life with him, which is probably totally forbidden in China because
Mhm.
it says tremendous things. And I found that very, very, very instructive. There is an enormous variety of books that would be hard pushed these days.
Yeah.
Uh, Hamsun, yes, that is certainly something. And I'm now reading books about totally different areas, economy and medicine, but particularly say pharmaceuticals, and how you distinguish between one. So the things that I collect here and there, and I jump from a flower to another.
Yeah.
There is a book of books that describe a very local reality. Trieste is a corner of different countries, and there are lots of conflicts here between people from nearby Croatia or Slovenia that used to be of Italian origin and being kicked out. At the same time, there are Slovenes in Trieste, in Italy, that are not being treated properly by the rest of the society. There are frictions. There are stories of families that are interesting to read. Paolo Rumis is a writer that writes these things about. Um, the, I don't have a unique direction to go and read. I should say, however, unluckily, that both the amount of time that work takes, energy goes down, and therefore you have to take longer to solve the same integral. And the pervasiveness of the media, although I do not subscribe to anything, Facebook, whatever, but still, you watch the news, you get bombarded, so many emails, PNAS sends a paper a day to referee or whatever. So the time shrinks. The time is a commodity that really runs short, much shorter than oil or whatever, gas. No, time. And so this is cutting tremendously on reading, which used to be the main my main staple.
Yeah, I can imagine. And but you were still on different fronts, and also your reading interest seem to be varied as your research interests are, and fiction has find a way with you in your life, in science, in reading, and everywhere. How many languages do you speak?
Where the number of languages I speak is shrinking with time, because if you do not practice something, the languages tends to go away. Also, memory sort of is shrinking. But so my base dialect, the Nonantula Modena dialect, is my first language ever, of course. And then Italian is the mother tongue, and English I have to use it every day. I had picked up a fair amount of course, French. I learned French in school. At the time when I was brought up in school, the English was not yet so popular. It was mostly French, and French is a wonderful language and a wonderful culture, which I think is partly being obscure in modern times because of the prevalence of English. But I think I treasure it very much, and even went as far as picking up some German after a year in Stuttgart and another year in Frankfurt. I'm sorry, in Zurich. Although the community I lived in at that time was already so much fluent with English that it sort of partly
Yeah.
took away my efforts to learn German. So I can still manage to read
Hmm.
German and speak very very rudimentary first necessary German. And of course, in the young times, you would want to pick up some Russian, and so and here in Trieste, the Slavic surroundings have languages that are similar to Russian, so you pick up words here and there. But I'm not able to speak. I used to speak some Czech, but it is gone, and so it's basically three languages.
Yeah. Do you want to mention any of your role models? You mentioned throughout our conversation, couple of them. Do you want to mention anybody whom you have come contacted with and who had changed your life?
They are spread here and there. I would tend to remember and mention mostly either people connected with family, say my brother Tonino, who passed away 3-4 years ago. If he had not been there and sort of paving the way, showing the way, my brother, uh, he was 12 years old senior to me. So when I remember him, he was already grown up and not giving a great attention to his younger brother. But I think eventually we caught up in a great way after that. And certainly, besides my parents, my brother and sister were really extremely influential. Then most of other most of other people that I would treasure tend to be connected with school or research. Um, this guy in music, so the Livio Borri, the guy who brought me to sing in this choir, I think I owe it to him a lot. Also, being brought in contact with uh, with, uh, with serious music, and the way you the way you do it, the way he was teaching us without us being able to read music. He was just teaching us like that, and we all, including Pavarotti himself, certainly learned independently of reading anything. Well, that's a talent, right? Um, um, but say in the world in physics and in science, people like Daniele Amati, who was my professor at Modern University. Then I found him back here in Trieste as the head of SISSA for 15 years after Paolo Budinic is shaped up completely and made SISSA the great reality, which I believe is today. Franco Bassani, I mentioned him already because he sort of saved me out of high energy physics into so and um, uh, several others. There are friends. There are people like Alfonso Baldereschi. Baldereschi was occasionally around when you were around in ICTP. He was at the university, right? And he would come in very strange times and in very strange shapes. But he was very much behind. I brought him. I mean, it is my one of the prize of my life to have brought him to Trieste when I won a professorship and I was supposed to go to Trieste University. I followed Budinic's advice to go to SISSA, but I said I will do that if we get Alfonso Baldereschi to come to Trieste. And he brought him here. And I think Alfonso was very instrumental in many, very deep, very deep and very instrumental in many other things. Well, of course, then Michele Parinello and Roberto Carlo, because they are not only the great guys they are my dear friends and really people that influenced me very much in many ways. Other Banda Andreoni is another. So former collaborators, but they are all how should I say, Giuseppe Santoro. They are all people inside Michele Fabrizio. They are all inside the work sphere. I probably did not expand too much uh, beyond this professional and physicist sphere for maybe lack of enterprising spirit or just simply lack of time being so much absorbed by many other things that had to be carried on.
Thank you, Erio. I do not know how you manage things. So many different, you wearing different hats and you are doing it to the level of excellence, everything. And there is only one last question before I let you go. So if you see your this illustrious life and having gone through different roles and different places, meeting different people, what are the biggest challenge do you think you have faced? And if one you can mention, and if you go back now to your younger self, what did you advise?
First of all, there's a large number of shocks I have gone through. Many of them positive, some of them not so positive. We can talk about those some other time. But every shock you get um, has to be absorbed, and if you can absorb it properly, then you learn from it, and it's a positive shock. It sort of leads the way. So the main thing I would say is I would not like to have somebody tell me what to do. Okay, so uh, right or wrong, I would like to make the decision as well informed as I can under the wings or the lovely, loving protection of whoever I have been lucky to find following that, but not possibly not following something that I have to do because they tell me to do it. This is part of a reaction that the military service, for instance, had on me. I went into the weather forecast service of the Air Force thinking that was physics, right? Geostrophic equations and so on. But no, the only thing I liked about military service was marching because marching is a physical exercise. In the spring in Florence, marching is perfect. Okay. No, so now, because you don't want to have to do things that other people tell you, then you try to make up your own career in the best and fastest possible way. You don't wait. You don't waste. How should I say? Time or efforts or whatever to to follow up whatever potential or talent or ideas or curiosity you have. Dive into it as much as you can immediately. Now, at the time when I grew, no one wanted to do science and no one wanted to be at university, so I had an easy game. I was only a fool that would take this, so I took it. Then this takes you to a point where you find yourself in a situation of unexpected power and control. You are in a situation where the world is offering you to administer things because, and you need to be part time of administrator, otherwise, you do not build the thing that anyhow you have to build. And this is where the challenge comes because it's like to be on the tip of a knife, on the edge of a knife. If you follow that thing, on the other side there is administration power. Uh, that are things that I'm not good at. I don't like them. In fact, I despise them, and I I find that there are a lot of mediocre people who live in that community, and they value things that I do not value. In fact, I think very badly of them. So you get to the top of something as quickly as possible so that you are independent, and then not don't fall. You try not to fall into the trap that is awaiting everyone in a position like that. That is a very difficult exercise. I've been trying to stay on the verge of it all my life with variable success, but this is a something which I think is delicate and uh, and difficult to do. Difficult to do because either you fall into somebody's flock and you have to tell what the flock leader says, or else you are the flock leader and you have to tell others what to do, and then you become their administrator and you cannot indulge in grazing the grass of physics, which you would like to do as a sheep, as yourself. Um, I'm not sure what mistakes I would going back not do, because I found that I learned more by my mistakes than by my successes. Um, so I would say to everyone in life these days, wear your big hat, strengthen your shoulders, and go on, and don't compromise. Follow your own instinct. Uh, if one day you will ask yourself, or somebody will ask, why the hell did you do what you did? And you would have an answer. Say, I liked it. I loved it. This was something that I had a strong feeling for, and there's only one life, and I did what I wanted to do. Um, Good or bad, somebody else will judge. But that's what.
Thank you, Erio. Thank you for these nuggets of wisdom that you shared with us today. And thank you for having lived the life and encouraging generations of physicists and people uh, how a satisfying, curious life could be led. And when the opportunities come, you might have to wear some hats that you might not necessarily like at times, but take them as duty as you have done all your life. And thank you for inspiring so many young people, and also being through your mentorship helping thousands of careers, including mine. You have impacted my life in a great way when it was required at a crucial time. So I cannot thank you enough for your time and being there always for us. Thank you so much.
I thank you, Sananda. You're far too kind, but I'm very grateful to you for these words.
That was my conversation with Professor Erio Tosatti. And for me, this episode will remain one of the most meaningful conversations of the DPT podcast. What made this episode so special is not only the extraordinary scientific journey we heard, but also the depth of the reflection behind it. Professor Tosatti's career has moved through some of the most important spaces in theoretical physics. From Modena to Pisa, from Cambridge to Rome, from ICTP and SISSA to collaborations and communities across the world. But underneath this remarkable scientific life, there is a deeper thread, the belief that science is not done alone. From his childhood in a rural peasant family, he has learned the importance of coherence, responsibility, and doing things together. That early lessons seem to have traveled with him throughout his life, into physics, into mentorship, into institution building, and into his way of thinking about scientific communities. One of the strongest messages from this conversation is that scientific excellence is only one part of the story. The other part is what we build for others. This episode also carries a beautiful humility. Even after a lifetime of scientific achievements, Professor Tosatti repeatedly returns to the idea that we understand very little, the nature is complex, and our failures teach us more than our successes. For students, teachers, mentors, or anyone who is trying to build something meaningful, this conversation offers more than a career advice. It offers a way of thinking about science as a shared human project. As this is the episode 20 of the DPT podcast, I cannot think of a more meaningful guest to mark this small milestone. Professor Tosatti's life reminds us that science is not only about understanding nature, it is also about building communities, creating opportunities for others, and letting others fly. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment, like, and share it with someone who might find this conversation meaningful, especially someone who is trying to build something together. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel or follow us on the podcasting platforms so that you don't miss any future episodes. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.